I've been mixing and mastering indie music for over 10 years, and within that time frame, I've garnered over 9 million streams on Spotify from my own indie pop music catalog, and I've learned that there are 5 vocal mixing mistakes that I see beginners do all the time. And now by the end of this video, you'll know how to avoid those mistakes and finally start getting that professional quality sound that you're looking for. And those 5 mistakes that we're going to be going over involve pitch correction, overcompression, the order of effects that you use, your recording environment, as well as the amount of plugins that you're using. So I personally know these mistakes super well. Back when I was in middle school, I was working on what I thought was the best song that I had ever made until it got to the part of the vocals. And after recording, I was so excited to listen back to what I had made to almost then become close to crying because of how bad the vocal mix was. And so it wasn't until I fixed these mistakes that I felt proud of my own voice. And when we fix them for you, your music is going to go from something like this
So what can slow you down? Ooh.
to a little bit more like this.
So what can slow you down?
As a bonus resource for helping you mix your vocals using fundamental techniques, I want to offer you my free True and Tried vocal guide down in the link in the description below. But now listen to this first mistake so we can get you started on getting those clean vocals. So the first mistake is one I've heard so many artists, including myself, make so many times, and it's easily fixable and it will instantly improve the quality of your vocal mix. And that mistake is not using pitch correction. Going back to that song that I made back in middle school, a big reason why I was so sad was because when I played back the song on my speakers, I was horribly off pitch. My confidence was shot and I was just destroyed. I thought that if I had used pitch correction, I was actually admitting defeat and that I'm a bad singer. But over time, using pitch correction actually gave me more confidence in my voice because not every vocal take will be perfect. But pitch correction makes it so that the process of recording becomes a lot less stressful. So all you have to do to pitch correct your vocal is apply a pitch correction plugin of your choice, either a native one from your own DAW or a third party, and snap your vocal to the key of your song. And now I personally use FL Studio's NuTone plugin, but M-Auto Pitch is a great free third party alternative if you don't have any native pitch correction plugins in your DAW or you just don't want to use them. And so just be aware of the different types of pitch correction methods that you might be using, whether it's manual or auto. And so if these things kind of don't sound familiar, feel free to check out my free True and Tried vocal guide down in the link in the description below if you're curious to learn more. But remember, if you're losing confidence in your voice, pitch correction isn't admitting defeat or will make people think that you're a fake musician, especially in indie music. If you're using this tool in moderation, it'll help bring your confidence back into your mix, your vocal performance, and deliver the listening experience that you're dreaming of for your listeners.
But what can slow you down? Ooh, you turn around and make the situation go smooth. But what can slow you down? Ooh, you turn around and make the situation go smooth.
Now, pay close attention to this next mistake because there is a lot of nuance to this one. I personally love using compression and I use it a lot for different scenarios as it's one of those fundamental effects that massively impact the clarity of your mix. And in a bit, you'll know exactly how to use compression effectively on your vocals. But first, you have to understand the mistake that you might be making, and that mistake is over compressing your vocals. Now, back during Thanksgiving, I made a homemade KFC famous bowl and I had a bunch of leftovers of mashed potatoes, corn, gravy, cheese, and popcorn chicken, and it was enough to make my girlfriend one when she came to visit me. Now, if I were to just throw all those ingredients into the microwave at the exact same time, some of those ingredients would be too hot and others would be too cold because some things just require more time in the microwave and while others require less. This is the same kind of concept when it comes to your vocals and compression. Sometimes vocals have so much dynamic range that one compressor can actually overcompress certain parts of your vocal while barely affecting other parts, just like the ingredients in a microwave. And so in situations like this, using a compressor to reduce significant transients in your vocal first, and then adding another compressor to smooth out the previously compressed vocal will give you a more natural compression rather than a super squashed sound. And this technique is actually called serial compression. It's not really just used for compression either. Engineers will also stack things like EQ and saturation to make each plugin work less, leading to a more smoother and natural result.
I'm singing with big dynamic range. I'm singing with big dynamic range.
And so now you know how to avoid overcompressed vocals, but keep watching because layering plugins correctly isn't just for compression, as I'll be explaining in this next beginner mistake. So this mistake is one I know most beginners do because I would always do this when I was first starting my mixing journey back in middle school. But once you stop doing this, your vocals will sound significantly more polished. And that mistake is applying your stylistic effects first to your vocal chain, like reverb, distortion, or delay. So back when I was first learning mixing in middle school, I actually had my older brother rap over a cover I was doing of the song Superstar by Lupe Fiasco. And when I showed him the effects that I added, he actually didn't really think it sounded that great. And I told him that these effects were all that you could do in FL Studio, but he was like, I highly doubt it. You should probably try to look into it a little bit more. And it turns out he was right. Reverb isn't the only effect that you could put onto your vocals. So the point that I'm trying to make is that stylistic effects like reverb are exciting to use because they're the most noticeable to our ears. I mean, when you put on a reverb or distortion, it's noticeable right away. But when we put these effects first in our vocal chain, rather than cleaning up our vocals first with things like EQ and compression, we actually risk emphasizing the worst parts of our vocal rather than the best parts using these stylistic effects. So order of plugins in your chain actually matters tremendously. So after that conversation with my brother, I put in some effort to actually learn how to mix vocals out of spite because I really didn't think there's actually anything to learn. And I mean, like, how much more complicated could it be than just hitting record on your DAW, right? But I actually did learn that there was a lot that I didn't know. And later when I showed him these new techniques, he said it was actually noticeably better. So don't be too prideful like I was and clean your vocals, please, before adding your stylistic effects. So going back to the topic of just hitting record, this next mistake is actually going to be one that you want to hear because it's arguably one of the mistakes that make the biggest difference to your vocal mixing. But before we talk about that, as you can tell, I put in a lot of effort toward acoustically treating my studio with acoustic foam, and that's for a really good reason. Once you understand why, you'll start to notice that your vocal mixing becomes a lot easier and sounds a lot better. And that's because this next mistake I hear beginners make all the time, especially clients of mine, and that is not recording in a clean environment. So let's pretend that I had to make a pumpkin pie from scratch and all I had at home were potatoes. I tried to make a pie with the potatoes and I add cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and a bunch of different spices to try to make it taste as close as pumpkin pie as possible. But then I give a slice to my family and they're like, I mean, whatever, it's not really pumpkin pie, but it's fine, I guess. So if I had just put in the extra time to go to Aldi and get the actual foundational ingredient, which is the pumpkin, the process of making pie would have actually been a lot easier and it probably would have tasted better too. And that's exactly what happens when you don't record a clean vocal take from the beginning. No matter how good the plugins you use are, your life actually becomes so much easier when you set the gain of your microphone properly, you record a good distance away from that microphone, and you reduce the background noise in your recording environment like the reverb. And that's because the strong foundation is already there in your vocal recording. So if you've done all of this and your vocal is still not a clean slate, as a last resort, you could do something like using Adobe Podcast and add speech feature and significantly clean your recording because we're at that point with AI now. And I'm actually using it for this video right now. This is how my voice sounds like unedited, but just be aware that when you do add this effect, you might experience some compression or EQ that's more suited for podcasts rather than music. So just be aware of it. But now with the foundation of your vocal mix cleaned up, the rest of the mixing process will become significantly smoother. But I want you to keep watching because this last mistake is stopping you from mixing vocals like a professional engineer. This mistake is one I find myself getting a little bit self-conscious about from time to time, but once you realize it, it actually really does for your creativity a lot. And that mistake is not using enough plugins in your vocal chain. I remember there's this vocal I was mixing that had hella EQs and compressors and all sorts of different effects that I had to use 2 mixer channels in FL Studio just to fit it all. But all these plugins made me self-conscious because it looked super cluttered and had me thinking that I was doing way too much for just this one vocal. But the vocal was actually finally sitting in the mix really well. And when I look back at all the effects in my chain, I actually could name a reason for every single one of those effects. And so when we first start out, I think it's really easy to believe that one EQ or one compressor is all you're supposed to be using. And if it doesn't sound right, you're bad at mixing. But just like there's a time and place for CO compression, there actually might be times where you just have to use more effects on your vocals. And it doesn't matter the amount of plugins that you're using, but the reason that you're using those plugins. So as long as you can explain why you're using it and it sounds good to you, then it's justified to use those plugins. Now I don't let the look of my vocal chain hold me back that much from making something that I actually love. And that's been super freeing and probably one of the most eye-opening realizations that I've made as an artist and audio engineer. So now you too know how to think like an audio engineer, but if you're still missing the fundamental knowledge on vocal mixing techniques, then my true and tried vocal guide will definitely get you up to speed. So feel free to check it out in the link in the description below. I hope some of these mistakes resonated with you and your next song comes out just the way it sounds in your head because of it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't be afraid to show your genius.